A development debate brewing on Election Day, and the question, should land use planning questions be settled in the voting booth?
We found 71% support for legalizing marijuana, which is kind of surprising because only 6 years ago in 2010, 54% of voters voted down an initiative to legalize marijuana.
A new high for a ballot measure supporting legalizing pot in California, but why this support may not translate into more votes come November.
It doesn't have blood in it, it doesn't have bones, but I literally feel like it is a part of me.
New hope for wounded veterans, the technology that helps them move beyond their disabilities. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. San Diego leaders and first responders gathered today at the San Diego Civic Concourse to mark the 15-year anniversary of 9/11. The ceremony paid tribute to the 3,000 people who died in the terrorist attacks, including nearly 400 firefighters and police officers.
In the face of terrorism, all of our first responders that day, they chose patriotism. And in the face of fear, they chose heroism. They will never be forgotten.
The tribute included a color guard presentation, a moment of silence, and testimony from a firefighter who survived the collapse of the World Trade Center. Retired Lieutenant Joe Rio with the New York City Fire Department spent 3 days buried in the rubble.
I was declared dead for 3 days. I actually woke up in a hospital in another state. They had put me on a boat and took me across the river that separates New Jersey from New York, and I ended up in Jersey City Trauma Center in the operating room.
Durio says he's traveling the country to share his story in hopes of inspiring patriotism and to help people connect to 9/11 so they'll never forget. San Diego is hosting several other events to commemorate the anniversary of the attacks, including a 9/11 memorial stair climb on Saturday at the Hilton San Diego Bayfront. A Democratic Congresswoman with her eye on the U.S. Senate has a lot of catching up to do. That's according to a new poll from Cal Speaks at Sacramento State. We checked in with political director Kim Nalder, who says there's one group of voters who are still on the fence about the race. So let's jump right in. The results are in. What did the poll find when it comes to the race for Senator Barbara Boxer's seat?
It's actually pretty overwhelming. A lot of political observers thought that this race might be closer because in the top two primary with two Democrats in the race, Republicans are forced into a choice that's, maybe not comfortable. And usually that means they pick the moderate. But in this case, it looks like Harris is ahead. She's got 51% and 19% for Sanchez. And she's ahead in almost every subgroup you can name. Where she does the best is amongst Latinos, and even there she only gets 33%, and that ties with what Harris gets.
So both Sanchez and Harris are Democrats. Did either one of them get overwhelming support from Republicans?
Neither one of them are getting overwhelming support for Republicans, but Harris is getting more support than anyone else. There's still about a third of Republicans who are undecided, which makes sense because they're forced into a tough choice that, they have to pick a Democrat. But, it's very much the case that they look like they're trending towards Harris, which is a bit surprising.
So where is Sanchez's biggest support? Where does she have the strongest support?
Sanchez has the strongest support amongst Latinos, but even then it's only 33%. She has 25% amongst people making $50,000 to $100,000. But really her support is, 25% or below in almost every subgroup you can think of.
How about Proposition 64 to legalize recreational marijuana? What did the poll find?
We found 71% support for legalizing marijuana, which is kind of surprising because only 6 years ago in 2010, 54% of voters voted down an initiative to legalize marijuana.
That's more support overall for legalizing recreational marijuana than other recent polls. Why might that be?
One of the reasons is that this poll was commissioned by NPR stations across the state, and they were interested in understanding the opinions of all Californians, not just likely voters. And so some of the people in our poll may not end up voting. For example, the youngest voters, 84% of them, or the youngest respondents, I should say, 84% of them support legalizing non-medical recreational marijuana. Many of them probably won't end up voting. So that's why our numbers are probably a little bit high.
So Prop 64 is supported not only by Democrats, but Republicans. Is this new?
Yeah, it's actually surprising. Although, if you look at nationwide polls on marijuana, the trend has been increasing support amongst all subsets of the population, and that's been true in California as well. I mean, even back in 2010 when we had a similar initiative on the ballot, early on, if you asked a generic question, people were in support of, legalizing marijuana in general. It's just that when they got to the specifics and started thinking about the potential downsides, for children or for traffic accidents and so forth, that the support started to erode. And I suspect that will start to happen from here on out when people start to pay attention to this initiative as well.
The poll was commissioned by the California Counts collaboration of public media groups, which includes KPBS. This November's ballot will include 17 statewide initiatives, the most since 2000. Among several of the measures, voters will be deciding on whether or not to raise the tobacco tax and what to do about the state's death penalty. The initiative process has been part of California's political climate since the early 1900s. Governor Hiram Johnson saw the initiative as a way for citizens to combat the sway of big business that the big business had over lawmakers. Proposition 13, which put a cap on property tax, is one of the more famous pieces of legislation enacted by this process. Opponents of Measure A have filed a lawsuit. It would hike San Diego's county sales tax by a half cent. The money would go to pay for transportation and infrastructure improvements. Opponents say some of the arguments in favor of Prop A are misleading. For instance, that it will reduce fares for seniors and improve water quality. Measure A was put on the ballot by Sandag. Its opponents are Governor Kevin Faulconer and environmental groups. It's the second court action to question whether the proposed descriptions on the local ballots are fact or fiction. The other has to do with the Lilac Hills Initiative, or Measure B. Opponents of the development in Valley Center aren't happy with the description of their position on the ballot. A judge is expected to rule on that case next week. At the heart of the Lilac Hills Initiative is the dilemma of where to build new homes for San Diego's growing population. Every voter in the county will have a say. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says the question is not just if it would be a good development, but if ballot initiatives are the best way to question the land use planning.
A tractor drones on a hillside off in the distance as James Gordon points from his driveway to fields on the rolling hills beyond.
That dirt road going up on the side of the greenhouses, that is going up through the center of their property. All of that is the southern part of the Lilac Hills Ranch project.
Gordon lives on the edge of the 600 acres where Accretive Investments proposes to develop a master-planned community. It would add 1,700 homes to where just 110 are called for in the county's general plan for growth. Gordon says there's a reason the developer has gone to the expense of collecting signatures and putting this project on the ballot, rather than going through normal channels.
They could have avoided all this money and just gone to the Board of Supervisors, but they didn't because they couldn't. They couldn't because the project wouldn't be approved, and if it was approved, it would be approved with too many conditions. So what do? It was cheaper to spend a couple million to throw it on the ballot because they could, sham the voters and a sweetheart deal for the developer.
You can't have any of my land.
But Paul Schumann, who lives in nearby Fallbrook, supports the Lilac Hills Ranch development and calls the opponents NIMBYs.
They're just saying no. They're saying no to virtually every project that comes into the area that has to do with what's in their backyard. And in the back,
Schumann helped collect signatures for the ballot measure.
read the initiative.
He says there's no sham. The details are all in the 600-page initiative document.
It's 608 acres.
It's a sustainable master plan community, he says, that has something for everyone.
The community, Lilac Hills Ranch, is perfect for a starter, for middle income, higher income, and senior, along with senior housing. So the entire community can stay together. I can have 4 generations of family within a community, and they will all feel like it's their home.
Schumann says voters all over the county understand the need for more housing.
If we put it to the voters for the first time will have a democratic process. They will be able to look at the project and go on, that's something the county needs.
But it's a democratic process that, in one vote, could overturn another sort of democratic process, years of community planning. By putting the Lilac Hills Initiative on the ballot, the developer, Accretive Investments, effectively bypasses more than a decade of local planning. Valley Center does have plans for a lot more houses, just not here. The roads around Lilac Hills are 2-lane and winding, not wide enough to handle the 19,000 extra car trips a day the project would generate. About 7 miles to the east, where the local community planning groups did call for more dense development, the county put in a new 4-lane road from Escondido up to Valley Center. It runs right past where another developer, Kerry Garza, is working on a project of between 300 and 600 new homes.
It was a perfect opportunity we saw to actually start the growth of Valley Center in the place they wanted, in the core of the South Village, and to be the developer that brings the community at large what they really want, a new town center in Valley Center.
Garza is not taking his project to the ballot because he expects to get approval going the normal route.
We have 4 different segments of homes.
Through the County Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
Why would we have problems if we're building exactly what they asked for, right? We're building it per the general plan.
We're about 1,000 units a month short from housing.
Schumann argues that Lilac Hills is also following the general plan's guidelines.
What it calls out for is villages and communities. What are we building? We're building a village community. We're doing exactly what the general plan said.
But opponents like Gordon say the developer bought the land cheaply precisely because it was not slated for development.
It shifts all of the liability for the substandard roads to the county.
He says it will leave county taxpayers and future homeowners to pick up millions of dollars for wider roads and another fire station. He says it's too easy to get projects on the ballot.
It doesn't matter whether you're Chula Vista or National City or Rancho Santa Fe. What will happen if this is successful, wherever you have a developer who wants to just make a buck, spend $1 million and make the voters vote on it, it sets a precedent which is disastrous for this county.
The unincorporated semi-rural backcountry offers tempting open space for more development, but voters will need to weigh the urgent need for new construction with the precedent that this initiative may set for bypassing the will of local communities anywhere in the county. Alison St. John, KPBS News.
Donald Trump's running mate is in town. Vice presidential hopeful Mike Pence fundraised today in San Diego at an event at the La Jolla Beach Club and Tennis Club. Admission to the lunch event went from $1,000 to $2,700. The Indiana governor is expected to be in the region for 2 days, including a planned speech tomorrow at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and Museum in Simi Valley. 2 employees are suing ITT Educational Services a day after the for-profit college chain announced it's shutting down. The lawsuit alleges the company violated federal law by not providing 60 days notice. It seeks class action status on behalf of the 8,000 employees who are losing their jobs as a result. In total, ITT closed 130 campuses in 38 states. New data shows California residents have been consistent in water conservation efforts. Water officials recently loosened conservation requirements as water supply conditions have begun to improve. But experts say the drought is far from over.
It's a major challenge, but we also may not be in a drought. We may be in a permanent change of climate. And so we need to start learning how to live how to make conservation a California way of life so that we can have water for important things like jobs, like industry.
Cities like Malibu and Anaheim saw major decreases in the amount of water saved. The San Diego County Water Authority says the county saw a 17% July savings rate. A stubborn marine layer hung around this morning in San Diego. This is footage from the Embarcado in downtown San Diego. Janae Jocker says northern Pacific air is expected to blow through the county this week and leave behind dry, sunny weather for the region. She has that in tonight's forecast.
Moisture from what was Hurricane Newton has moved into southeastern Arizona, dropping quite a bit of rain. As we take a look at the satellite radar, you can see it down there. It's going to be pushing into New Mexico throughout the day tomorrow. But out here in Southern California, the last 6 hours have been pretty clear. As you can take a look at the satellite and radar, not seeing much in that area. Tonight, we're going to have a normal pattern of those clouds rolling in, and then they'll dissipate tomorrow throughout the morning and into the afternoon. Your low tonight, 67 degrees. Across the county, those temperatures on the coast up into the upper 60s, but as you head inland, you'll even get down into the low 50s. In Mount Laguna, out in Mecca, though, 70 degrees, so a little bit warmer out in that area. Here's your setup for Thursday. We have some Pacific air that's ushering in some nice, dry temperatures for us here in California and through Nevada into Utah. Out a little bit west or east, there's that low pressure system that was Hurricane Newton. That's adding some moisture into what will move into some issues in the Central Plains states. Here's your 5-day outlook for the coast. We're in a normal pattern for this time of year in the mid 70s and those lows in the low 60s. Partly cloudy skies for the most part, and that sun is going to pop out the weekend. Looking like a great weekend to go to the beach or to get outside with your family. As we head inland on Thursday, 83 degrees for your high. We're going to have some low clouds, but then the rest of the day it's going to be sunny. The rest of the week looking pretty similar as well. You're going to be into the mid 80s, but by Monday next week, you're in the low 80s and those nighttime lows sitting in the 50s. So getting a little bit cool. It's starting to feel like fall. Into the mountains we go. You can see we're starting in the mid 70s on Thursday. Those temperatures are going to raise up into the mid 80s by the weekend. So it's going to be quite warm and mostly sunny there. Now the desert is hot as usual. We're in the upper 90s and into the triple digits. The sun is out and it is definitely shining, looking pretty nice as far as getting outdoors and not having any precipitation. Come Monday, though, those temperatures, they're going to drop back down into the mid 90s. For KPBS News, I'm Shanae Shocker.
427 San Diegans took their own lives in 2015. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg says the County Suicide Prevention Council presented its annual report today.
The report shows the number of people who died by suicide in San Diego County went up slightly last year, but the rate of suicide per 100,000 people held steady. The report points out three populations with a high risk of suicide: veterans, Native Americans, and LGBT youth. Catherine Prescott lost her transgender son Kyler to suicide. He was 14.
I can never make sense out of his death, but I can try to do something positive out of my grief to try and help save somebody else the way Kyler wasn't able to be helped.
The report says visits to the county's suicide prevention website, called It's Up to Us, rose by 57% last year. And nearly 2,000 San Diegans took part in a special training to learn how to help someone who may be at risk. Suicide prevention specialist Stan Collins says it never hurts to ask.
I try to remind people constantly the most important conversations you can have around the dinner table, on the couch, over the phone with the people that you love, to not be afraid to ask someone directly, are you thinking about suicide and what can I do to help?
To be sure, suicide is a complex problem that defies easy solutions. Nonetheless, the Suicide Prevention Council says encouraging more people to seek help is a good first step. Reporting from the County Administration Building, Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
And the number for the county's 24 access crisis line is 888-724-7240.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, we report from Chicago on the spike in deadly gun violence gripping the city. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
And that's how U.S. athlete Aaron Wills Fotheringham kicked off the Paralympic Games in Rio. About 4,300 athletes will compete in 22 sports for a chance to make the podium. More than 500 of those athletes will represent the U.S. Reports of budget problems that threaten the Rio Games until the last minute, but organizers promise a successful spectacle. MIT scientists are creating a bionic limb to emulate the function of natural ones. In tonight's ITV report, filmmaker Mark Minucci, Jonathan Halpernan, and Anna Bowers show how their advances have provided greater mobility and new hope for those with physical disabilities.
Before I went to the Marine Corps, I looked at amputees in a negative light. I mean, honestly, I was totally creeped out by them. I got wounded in a town called Karma, outside of Fallujah. Maybe that's karma, you know, maybe I got what I deserved. I brought the war home, you know. I would just spend a lot of time laying in bed, angry, looking to pick a fight. And then my war started becoming my wife's war and my son's war.
We humans are physical. And that physicality, of course, is directly coupled to our emotional state. As an engineer, we ask, can we build limbs that fully emulate natural biological limbs?
The first time I put the biome on, it was like, wow, what the hell is this? This is like RoboCop and Terminator. It's amazing.
The prosthetic has sensors like the sensors in the bottom of your foot for touch. It has a motor that emulates the lost muscle. It has 3 very small computers enabling the person to control the muscle-like motor system. I think we built the first powered foot-ankle device in 2003. And of course, I was the guinea pig. I mean, I've tested so many prototype electromechanical systems, I've lost count. In the struggle, in the battle of what comes after something as dramatic and acute as one's limb being amputated, one can think of bionics as resolving that battle into peace.
The war did take away things that I could never get back again. The prosthetic can only go so far because it's not the leg I was born with. But, you know, as far as the war at home, it kind of helps reduce the intensity of the despair you feel when you think back to those days. It doesn't have blood in it, it doesn't have bones, but I literally feel like it is a part of me. This is who I am.
This ITVS report was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. A new development for a former NPR producer in his fight for the right to vote. A San Diego judge has restored the voting rights for David Rector, who had a traumatic brain injury. She cited a new law that makes it easier for people with developmental disabilities to cast a ballot. Rector was in San Diego Superior Court recently using technology to express his desire to vote. Earlier, the judge said she needed more proof. But in her court order dated yesterday, she said she did not have the evidence to support her doubts. Federal authorities have taken the majority of the world's humpback whales off the endangered species list. Officials say the whales have made a major comeback through an international effort to save them.
Well, I think today's decision really shows that the Endangered Species Act works. and that it can take a population on the brink of extinction and bring its numbers back up to a healthy population level.
There are 14 distinct populations of humpbacks. 9 of those have recovered enough to be taken off the list. The mammals were nearly hunted to extinction and have been listed as endangered since 1970. But the species has been bouncing back since an international ban on commercial whaling took effect in 1966. Possibly the best warm-up for one of the most hyped-up tech events of the year could be some carpool karaoke.
I think we should listen to some music, and we should listen to a song all about where you're from. Sweet home Alabama, where the skies are so blue.
Apple CEO Tim Cook joined the Late Late Show host James Corden and musical star Pharrell for this YouTube-worthy clip. The other big deal to hit the stage, the new iPhone 7. Apple stock moved higher after the company introduced the new model. Analysts say it could help the Silicon Valley company recover from a recent dip in sales. One of the big changes, no more standard headphone jack. This model comes with these new wireless headphones. You can find tonight's stories on our website. That's kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.